Iran knew we were just tourists. That is what my guest today claims. Sarah Shourd was arrested when she was hiking with two other Americans on Iraq's border with Iran. After 14 months in Tehran's notorious Evin prison, she was released. But her fiancé and their friend are still there, nearly 2 years on. They've had barely any contact with the outside world, and although they were promised a trial, it still hasn't happened. What will it take to secure their release? Sarah Shourd, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
What were you doing hiking on what is one of the world's most volatile borders?
Well, I was living in Damascus with my now fiancé, Shane Bauer. We'd been living there for more than a year, and Shane is a journalist, an investigative journalist. He's been working in the region for nearly a decade now. And we moved to Damascus together. I was teaching Iraqi refugees. The two of us are peace activists, and it was sort of an extension of our work to actually come and immerse ourselves in a diverse community in the Middle East and learn Arabic. So northern Iraqi Kurdistan is a semi-autonomous area. It's a no-fly zone. It was made that way in 1991 to protect the Kurds from Saddam Hussein. It's all over their websites that it's actually a burgeoning tourist industry, and no American has ever been killed or kidnapped there in recent decades.
But you chose to go right up to the border. You were right on a, yes, not very well demarcated border, but somewhere which, as you know, you make it clear, you were not naive. You know about the world, you know about the area.
Right.
Why go there?
Right. Well, we were very unfortunate. You know, we were given we were misled as to how close the border is. We asked our hotel manager in Salaminiya, a taxi driver, a restaurant owner. They all said this was the best place to go hiking, Ahmed Awa. It's a beautiful green area with waterfalls. We arrived there by taxi, and there were hundreds of other people, whole families, camping there overnight. We stayed with them overnight, and then we asked them a good trail to hike on. They said, there's no problem with this trail. So we hiked for several hours. I think the only mistake that we made is that perhaps we hiked too far. We were a little overzealous. We were just enjoying ourselves so much that we lost track of time. But we thought that the border was miles and miles away, and we
Do you accept that it looks suspicious?
You know, I accept that there's animosity between the U.S. and Iran that's real, and that's 30 years of animosity and suspicion on both sides of governments. But I think that it was clear immediately when the soldiers saw us that we had no intention to come to Iran. We had nothing on us, no equipment. I was wearing shorts and no headscarf. What headscarf is mandatory in Iran. The first thing the soldiers did was take us to they forced us into their Jeep and drove us to the nearest town and bought me a headscarf because I couldn't even be seen.
But they
in
were
Iran.
Immediately suspicious of you, obviously. I mean, the fact that they immediately arrested you.
No, the soldiers were not suspicious of us. It was clear to them that we had come from a tourist spot and we had gone too far, we had gotten lost. I have no idea where the border is because there's no indication.
But did they make that clear to you? Did they, that they thought you were tourists or that they knew you were tourists?
I mean, yes, that was the very strong impression that I got, that they saw how confused we were when they were speaking Farsi. They saw that we didn't speak a word of Farsi, that we had nothing on us except for some food and, a few books. And they said, you just have to come for an hour and talk to our boss, and then we'll take you back to Iraq. They took us to Iran, bought me new clothes, drove us around for days and handed us off to different groups of people. It was obvious to them that we were tourists from the first second and absolutely no threat. And what I don't understand is why, when that became, blatantly evident, we weren't immediately taken back to our hotel.
But let's be clear, at the time, Roxana Saberi had only just been released from Evin prison. I mean, she's another American who had been picked up by the Iranians, and there'd been a very high-profile campaign. So the context, the time, I mean, there were also at the time there were 2 American television journalists being held in North Korea. I mean, Americans had been picked up on difficult borders and in difficult places. So this was something, when they picked you up, what did you think?
Of course, I was frightened, and it got progressively worse and worse, and I got more and more terrified as one day turned into 2 days. I mean, I was convinced from the second, from the get-go, that we'd done absolutely nothing wrong and that everything would be okay. They drove us around for days, and they kept telling us, you're going home, you're going home. And at one point, they forced us into the car and just drove us into the darkness. They drove us out into nothingness for more than an hour, and we were terrified. They were cocking their guns. We were afraid. We were afraid for our lives. We had no idea. Nothing in your life can prepare you for this kind of situation. And then the next day, they ended up taking us to a small prison in the middle of nowhere, and the next day they drove us to Tehran. Up until the last minute, they said, we're taking you to the airport. You're going home. Don't worry. So it wasn't until...
Were they treating you badly?
No. In the beginning, they weren't physically rough with us, but we were completely disoriented. We had no idea where we were.
And do you think they always intended that you should go to Evin?
There's no transparency. I have no way of knowing what the decision-making process was. All I know is that it was clear to me that they knew that we were just tourists and that they'd picked us up near a tourist site. And whatever decision-making led to my being thrown into prison and Shane and Josh and I being torn apart. And now, almost 2 years later, this situation is persisting.
Tell us about that moment when you get to Evin prison and you must realise then that actually you're not going home. You were put in a cell. You were separated from the men, and you were put in a cell.
Yeah, well, Shane and Josh and I, we had agreed that if they tore us apart, we were terrified of being separated. And we agreed if they tore us apart, we would immediately stop eating and go on hunger strike. And so we clung to each other, just screaming and, tears streaming down our faces. But they physically tore us apart, put us in different cells, and we stopped eating for 5 days until they finally allowed us to see each other for maybe 2 minutes. And at that point, Shane and Josh were just, we were all just reassuring each other. We were just saying, this is impossible. They can't possibly keep us. I'm sure they're going to let us go any day now. We had faith that it would be resolved immediately. They
were both put in a cell together. You were put in a cell on your own. Tell us what that was like.
Well, it's indescribable. The isolation is extreme. You go through a complete withdrawal the first few months. Everything that you love, everything that you care about has been torn away from you, and you're just sort of flailing. And it's excruciatingly painful emotionally. All I did was cry and beat at the walls. I mean, there were times where I had blood streaming down my hands from beating at the walls because I panicked and I feared the worst. Things got... There were just so many different phases. I mean, this is a very long period, as you know. But when the investigation ended, it was 2 months of investigation where they had us write everything about ourselves. They scoured through our email accounts. They found absolutely nothing. And my interrogator came into my interrogation room after 2 months and he said, "Sarah, I'm sorry, the investigation is being shut down. It's being put on hold." And I said, "Why? Does that mean I'm going to court and I'm going to go home?" And he said, "I don't know what's going to happen. Your case has become political. And even though I know you're innocent, I have no idea what's going to happen to you."
And in that 2 months when almost daily you were being taken off for interrogation, did you get any information?
No phone calls. Our first phone call was 5 months into our detention. I mean, not even being able to tell my mother that I'm alive. Shane and Josh have now been there 22 months. They've had 3 phone calls. And as far as I know, the average Iranian prisoner gets a phone call every week. So their isolation is extreme. I know Shane and Josh have very little information about the outside world. The last time we actually did get a phone call about 3 weeks ago. I missed it, but the mothers got a phone call.
This is from Shane and Joshua still there.
Yes.
But to go back to the point at which you were being held, to get a sense of what that was like, because did you know that the outside world knew you were in there? There was a point at which Swiss diplomats came to see you.
Yeah, that was after 2 months. So, I mean, that's what kept me alive, is knowing and, having faith that the world wouldn't forget about us and that, that people would come to our aid. And even though it's only an idea, it keeps you going. It stops you from slipping away.
And you were eventually allowed more regular contact with Shane and Josh. You had daily contact, twice a day for half an hour.
Yeah, when the isolation was starting to take, too heavy a toll on me, and they could see that I was losing my mind, they started to they put Shane and Josh together in the same cell. They were alone in complete isolation the first almost 3 months. They put them together, and they started to let us see each other in the open air room, which is just a larger cell with bars over the roof. And, all we could do was just hold each other and cry for the first several weeks. But we kept each other going. We gave each other the strength to go on. Prison is a very scary place. You don't know what's going to happen to you.
You're in a cell with a window?
A small window, yeah. Yeah, the first several months I was terrified that something would happen to me. I was terrified of violence. I would sleep with my plate, like a metal plate, against the door. It was the only way I could get to sleep because I was afraid someone would come into my cell at night. I mean, you're just defenseless and completely subject to the prison guards and
how did the women guards treat you?
Well, some of them were very sympathetic because I think it was clear to them that that I was a good person, that I love the Middle East. I would tell them about the fact that I support Palestinian rights, and that made them very sympathetic to me, and that I lived in Damascus and I was teaching Iraqi refugees, that that all three of us are anti-imperialist, peace activists, the kind of people you would think that Iran would applaud and not punish. But others were very cruel, and they hated me, and they made it clear. They wouldn't speak to me, they wouldn't look at me, they treated me sort of like I wasn't human. And there were times, there was one particular incident that is very difficult to talk about, that Shane and Josh were beaten by one of the guards. We were coming back from the open air room where we spent a little time together, and almost nearly every day Josh and Shane would get extra food if there was extra left over after all the prisoners were served. And this was a daily occurrence. Josh picked up some extra food, and one of the guards just went crazy. He was filled with rage, and he pushed Josh away from us and tore us apart and pushed Josh down the stairs. Downstairs, we had no idea where they were taking him or what they were going to do to him. And so Shane and I were screaming and yelling, "Stop, don't take him." And they made us go, they pushed us back to our cells, and I spent the next hour pounding at my door, screaming Josh's name. And then finally, I heard his voice. He was being taken back to his cell, and he said, "Sarah, I'm okay." So it was 24 hours before I heard what happened, and what actually happened was that Shane was forced back to his cell, and he was so scared for Josh that he kept banging on his cell the way I did. And the same guard came back to his cell and told him to be quiet, and he just kept saying, "Where's Josh? Where's my friend? What have you done with him?" And the guard just kept slamming Shane against the wall, and he slammed him against the wall again and again, 10 or 15 times, until the back of his head was bloody. And I saw them the next day, and I heard what happened. So you never know when something like that is going to happen. We don't know if they're safe. We hardly ever hear from them. This last phone call that we got about 3 weeks ago, it said, I wasn't able to talk to them, but they said that they'd been on a hunger strike for 17 days. I don't even know how that's possible, to not eat for 17 days. So we're terrified, and we don't understand. Iranian authorities have made so many actually positive statements. After I was released, I met with Ahmadinejad. He told me, he congratulated my mother on my release. He said we were good kids, that he knew about our politics and our stances against war and occupation. The chief of human rights, Javad Laranjani, he said that I was incapable of espionage, which is of course true, and so are Shane and Josh. So I don't understand why nothing's happened.
Why haven't you told that story about Shane being beaten up before? I didn't imagine in a million years that Shane and Josh would still be there 8.5 months after I was released. Did you think by not saying it that it would hasten their release? That if you didn't let out the worst of it?
You know, the last thing that we want is to be part of animosity between the U.S. government and the Iranian government. We have nothing to do with governments, you know? All three of us are peace activists. We want to help people. We want to understand the world better. And that's why we went to the Middle East and fell in love with the region. And so our story shouldn't in any way be mixed up in politics. You know, it's just about two innocent people in prison.
But it is so mixed up in politics. I mean, it is mixed up in internal Iranian politics and mixed up in the politics between the United States and Iran.
Yeah,
You've been critical of the American government, which you think should have done more.
I do. I mean, no one's done enough if Shane and Josh are still there after 2 years.
What got you out? Was it...
I was released. The judge told me I was released because I was a woman and because I was in solitary confinement, which is a harsher sentence. So it sets a precedent for Shane and Josh.
But there were fears over your health, which presumably there aren't fears over there.
No, I had a clean bill of health before I was released from prison. They took me to a specialist, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with me. So my release had nothing to do with health. It was because I'm a woman, and their chief of human rights said they were able to convince the judiciary that I was incapable of espionage.
Right. And there was bail posted. Mm-hmm. You understand by the Sultan of Oman, is that right? $500,000 of bail.
Right. Well, no one's taking credit for paying the bail, but the Sultan of Oman and his envoy facilitated my release. And they're still working to negotiate and to, you know, advocate for Shane and Josh's release on humanitarian grounds.
Do you give them more credit than you give your own government?
Well, I'm extremely grateful for them. They brought me home. I will forever have, you know, the country of Oman as a part of my, or in my heart, I should say. It was an incredible experience to be released to such a beautiful, peaceful country. You know, there's no transparency in this situation. I don't know why they're holding Shane and Josh. I don't know exactly why I was released. I have no idea why they haven't been released, or at the very least why they haven't been allowed to meet with their lawyer, why they haven't been tried. Their lawyer, Masoud Shafi, he's an incredible person. He's been defending them tirelessly within the parameters of Iranian law, but he's made no progress. The last trial session on May 11th, it was canceled, and the reason given by the judiciary was that Shane and Josh were not brought to court. And how is this any kind of justifiable reason not to give someone a fair trial after 22 months in prison?
Do you think, I wonder how often you think that they will be released? Or do you think perhaps this is just going to go on and on?
You know, I do have faith that they'll be released. I mean, I believe that, I mean, I don't know when, and of course I live, and all of their families and all of us live in constant anxiety and fear. But there are so many, I mean, Shane and Josh have done nothing wrong. And I have to believe that their good records, their good work in the world will make a difference. I don't know why it's taking so long and what the delay is, but all of the people that have stood up for them, you know, people that Iran really admires, like Noam Chomsky and Muhammad Ali, you know, Yusuf Islam, these people are, you know, they stand up for Shane and Josh because they believe in who they are, and their innocence is clear.
President Ahmadinejad, in an interview on a couple of occasions, has suggested that actually one option is that America could release Iranians, and that they're raising this idea of a possible prisoner swap. Is that something you've tried to pursue with the American government?
No. When I met with President Ahmadinejad, he didn't bring this up, and I haven't seen anything like that for a very long time.
But he did straight afterwards in an interview on ABC.
What he told me is, I hope that you're going to be married very soon and that you'll have many children. You know, I mean, I saw him face to face, and this is what I heard from him. So,
and did you think he would then go back and arrange the release?
Well, I did, yeah, and I'd like to believe that he's passed on. He's promised several times, both to me and in public, to pass on the recommendation for leniency and expediency for Shane and Josh. And I'd like to believe he's passed on that recommendation, and I don't understand why we haven't seen results.
He talked about the idea that you will soon be married. You got engaged while you were in there, didn't you?
I did.
Tell us about that.
I mean, it was incredible. Shane and I, we've been dating for many years. I mean, now it's been it's been 5.5 years, and we love each other very much. And, you know, Josh is now my best friend for life. He's like a brother to me. Shane, he surprised me with this. It came out of the blue, and it really helped us keep going.
He'd woven a ring for you.
Yeah, it was beautiful. He used the thread from his shirt and from a towel to make a ring for me, and he came to the open air room alone. Josh agreed to stay back in his cell so that we could have some time alone together, and he asked me to spend the rest of his life, my life, with him, and I'm really looking forward to doing that.
When there was a trial, as you say, scheduled for May the 11th, but you didn't plan to go back. Now, one can imagine the power of the television images of you sitting there, going back to get your fiancé out of prison.
Yeah.
Do you not think it would help secure his release if you were there?
It's a very difficult decision. I mean, it's the most difficult decision I've ever made. But in the end, I have to go with my my psychologist, who says that my PTSD could...
Your post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, I mean, we're all suffering from this, but it's, you know, the toll that it's taken on me and on my mental health makes us so much more afraid for Shane and Josh. They've been there so much longer than I was.
How is it still affecting you?
Extreme anxiety, you know, obsession with the campaign. There's nothing else that gives my life any meaning or any direction or helps me. It's the only thing that keeps me going, is to try to advocate for Shane and Josh. And I have insomnia, and I get very triggered with panic attacks of things that remind me of prison. And it was a very difficult decision. A part of me would like to stand with them and defend our innocence. I mean, we've been waiting for the chance to go to court now for 17 months. Was the first time that we were told we were going to court. So there's a part of me that would like to do that. But I know that Shane and Josh wouldn't want me to risk my own health, my own mental health for that. And
is there a part of you that feels guilty for being out when they're still in?
You know, not guilty. The last thing that Shane and Josh said to me when I saw them, when I was able to say goodbye to them, is they said they have total confidence in me and to advocate for them. And they had, you know, genuine joy in their faces. And I remember their faces every day. And I know that they want me to be out here telling their truth. And I'm grateful, you know, I'm grateful to be free. I'm grateful to be alive.
And what about Iran? I wonder, what did you think about Iran before all this happened?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't at all focused on Iran. I was learning about Syria. I was studying Arabic. I was focused on the Arab world. But I'm interested in Iran. It's a fascinating country with just an incredible history. And I don't understand how something like this could happen.
How do you feel about it now?
I mean, it's very hard to say. It hasn't... One of the things that really kept us going in prison, through everything that we went through, you know, the endless days, was the feeling, you know, the confidence that we could walk out unbroken, and that we could walk out with our values, you know, the essential parts of ourselves intact and unchanged. And I feel very proud of the fact that I haven't been, you know, that I'm not bitter or angry, and that you know, I see this as a huge misunderstanding and a tragic one, and I see that our treatment as cruel, but I don't blame Iranian people for that in any way. Iranian people have been extremely kind to me since I've
And the Iranian women inside, the women prisoners, were a support to you?
They were. Even though I could never see them or talk to them, they would sing to me sometimes in English. They would knock on the wall when I was screaming and crying, and shout, "I love you, Sarah." They showed me a lot of humanity.
Sarah Shourd, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.
Thank you.